This podcast was proudly sponsored by Carmel Riley Consulting, a social enterprise helping businesses solve social issues. Through the delivery of strategic, advisory and leadership development programs, the consultancy provides opportunities to underemployed professionals navigating hidden barriers to employment. Women and disability isn't something I've discussed on the show. Within the dyslexic community, there is great debate over the term disability and whether we are disabled or whether the world around us is disabling us rather than enabling us. So today's conversation is all about disabilities and gender with one of my mentors, Tricia Malowney from the Good Incubator program. Tricia is the chair of Women with Disabilities Australia. She is a proud woman with a disability who is passionate about advocating for women and girls with disability needs. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. What do you think of the term disability? Well, let's listen to what Tricia has to say. Welcome to the show, Trish.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you going?
Really great.
The Good Incubator program has been established by, in partnership with the state government, Victoria. Could you talk a little bit about the program?
As you know, there's a real need for people with disabilities to undertake real employment. For me, running my own business has been a boon for me. I work with who I want to, when I want to work with. So the Good Incubator has been established by Outlook in Pakenham, which is a disability organisation that doesn't run on traditional lines. They have been paying award wages for yonks, and they employ people with disabilities on an equal basis as other employees. And also with Impact Co, which is an organisation that established the Good Incubator model, which is run to support people with disabilities, in this case, to run their own businesses and become financially independent. And they've partnered with me because I have a disability, I run my own business, and I'm quite successful at what I do. And I've got really good connections to the disability community. So for us, the disability community means absolutely everybody who faces barriers in society. So we don't run on the medical model. So it's not about the diagnosis. It's about whether there's something in society that prevents you from living the life that you want to live. So, for example, there's visible and invisible disabilities. For me, people see that I use calipers and crutches and they think, well, that's the disability, but it's actually some of the psychosocial stuff that is actually more of a barrier, or perhaps my acquired brain injury that I got when I had a car accident that people don't see, but it does actually have more of an impact on what I do and when I do it. So the Good Incubator talks about how you can change your mindset to a growth mindset, how you can use empathy to gain clients, how to talk to clients, how to seek funding, how to ensure that you protect your intellectual property, all of those things that people do when they run a business. I'm really enjoying being a part of it because I hope through the enthusiasm of seeing people with the passion for their business, they'll be able to get to where I am, which is financially independent and running a business that suits me. And I run it when I want to, as I want to.
Well, there's so many things to unpack with what you've just said then. Financially independent is what I'm working towards. I'm so excited when the foundation actually pays me and I'm not a volunteer. But it was interesting. There's a couple of things. So the Good Incubator program, we've just started and I've been lucky enough to receive, say, a scholarship or a placement into the program, which has been super exciting because I think the more as business owners, the more support we can access and guidance and mentoring and peer support is so important. But also your comment around disability and the medical model. So within the dyslexic world or the learning disability space, it's really interesting because we feel like we're caught between this medical model of having to have that diagnosis, so then you're able to be protected under law if you're discriminated against, and to access certain funding. It's limited to those with dyslexia, but there is a little bit in higher education and in schools. And then we're caught between the social model where it's not a disability, it's an ability, and our brains think differently and we have these strengths because of it. So do you find with the work you do, particularly with the Women's Disability Australia, that there's still that conversation happening with physical disabilities? Or do you think it's more around the hidden disabilities now that people don't identify or struggle to?
And I think that for us, we sort of don't ask. What we base it on is what support needs do you need? Do you need it written differently? Do you need to have a conversation about this rather than get a complicated document that, you know, the words are written backwards to some people, you know, or is it that you just need to have an audio version of the documents? Or do you need an Auslan interpreter? That's the sort of stuff. Or do you need this event held in a place that you can actually get into? In my case, you know, I've been to events where it's actually, you know, upstairs. Well, that's fine. I'll stay down here and you just shout out the window because I'm not going to be able to get into there. So it is about, rather than focus on a diagnosis model, it's focused around what is society doing to disable us. Sometimes it's attitudinal. So I've been to meetings where I'm the expert in the room and people are wondering why I'm there. And don't forget that if you have dyslexia, you are the expert around dyslexia. Don't let anybody else tell you that they're the expert because they're an education or they're a psychologist. They're always trying to change it. The other thing I'd like to say is that there's nothing wrong with having a disability. Right? People are always asking me, what's wrong with you? Well, actually, nothing's wrong with me. I'm quite fine as I am, thank you. That this is me as I am. I come with my full self. And I wouldn't be who I am without my disability. It's how we shape ourselves in society. And organisations like Women with Disabilities Australia, People with Disabilities Australia, the Disability Leadership Institute, you don't have to sign anything that says, this is my disability. What you say is, I have a disability. And society tries to put labels on us. So this is where you fit in this. Well, I don't think dyslexia fits. Well, it's not up to you to decide. You're not the one who is facing the barriers. The person who has dyslexia, in my case, the person who had polio, the person who is deaf, the person who is blind, whatever it is, the person who has learning difficulties, the person who has an intellectual disability, all of them are the people who say, I have a disability. And it's not, and some people say that they are disabled. So the labels we place on ourselves are ours to place on ourselves. Nobody else has the right to label us. We own it. So whatever we're comfortable with.
And it's interesting you say that because in my book that I've recently written, I talk about the diagnosis and the word impairment and what did that mean and could I be repaired, because I thought I needed to be fixed. And as I go through the chapter, I talk about that feeling of being impaired and what did it mean and having, how do I fix myself? And at the end, it was like, well, do I need to be fixed, or is it that society needs to adjust and adapt to ensure that I'm able to achieve what I want to achieve? And is actually anything wrong with me?
And it's really interesting because I'm a fair bit older than you. So I'll say I'm 66. You know, I'm at an age where people retire and things have just got really exciting, so I'm not going to do that. But certainly when I started work, well, when I got my diagnosis at the age of 4 months, which was polio, my parents were told, well, put this one in a home, go away and have more kids. And they heard the second bit, but not the first. So there's 8 more after me.
Wow.
But I know. But the first bit was, well, we're not doing that. And I've asked my parents about that because in my day, that's what happened. People were put in a home if they had a disability. They went to specialist schools. And I was always mainstream. And there was an expectation on me that I would work, that I would be the same as everybody else. And I was treated the same as everybody else. except for the things that I needed. So nobody else in the family got to wear calipers. Nobody else in the family got to go to the pool every Wednesday for physiotherapy. So I don't think they were too keen on wearing calipers, but they were a bit jealous of me going to the pool on a Wednesday. So I was not treated any differently except for the sports I needed. So that's what I expected societies to be like. So it was a bit of a shock when I got to work, you know, and I worked from the age, I left school at 16, started work straight away. I worked in a bank, but I wasn't allowed to go to university back then because I wanted to teach. Well, you can't have somebody like you as a teacher because you've got a disability. So I went back to uni as a mature age student, so that was interesting. But it was also in the days when women got paid 70% of men's wages. I wasn't allowed to become a teller in a bank because I was female. Sort of think back then and go, really? I wasn't allowed to. If I got married, I had to ask the bank manager's permission. If I got pregnant, I had to leave work. So I was so busy working on that part of it, on the women's movement, that I didn't even think about disability. And it wasn't till I was working for Victoria Police as a disability. No, sorry, I wasn't. I was working for Victoria Police as a equity and diversity person. So teaching police how not to discriminate and how not to sexually harass people. So that was back in the 90s. And they said to me, will you be the disability liaison officer? And I said, well, I don't know anything about that. And they said, but you've got one. And I went, oh, okay. So, and then I found out a whole lot of things. I didn't know everybody wasn't as pushy as me, that everybody didn't demand access and demand what they needed. And so it sort of opened my eyes to the world of disability. I'd never seen myself as a person with disability, and now I embrace it because I think, you know, it's part of who I am. And it's time we change the world to say, you know, this is what I need. I don't need extra anything. This is my basic human rights. And I think that's the thing that we've got to look at, basing everything around the human rights framework, around the Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities, which Australia has signed up to, by the way. They have signed all of the conventions, but they get slated every time they do a shadow report. So there's still things happening that could be improved. I mean, if you look at what's happening overseas, we're certainly doing better than a lot of other countries, but we could do better.
It's interesting you say that because for people with learning disabilities, we're so far behind in other countries. Our rights within the workplace are negligible. People don't want to disclose because of fear of discrimination. The research I'm doing currently with La Trobe is the first of its kind, looking at dyslexia in the workplace. So in that perspective, for learning disabilities, we're definitely a lot further behind, but it's good to hear it generally that we are progressing compared to other countries.
And I mean, we're lucky we've got, you know, the supports that we have. And I would agree with you that there are a lot of people who have dyslexia who have never disclosed it, who have struggled and who have been able to mask it by using techniques. So it's almost like people think that if you have dyslexia, that means that you're not smart, or if you have learning difficulties, that means that you're not smart. If you have an intellectual disability, it means you're not smart. But people find their own ways, and sometimes, like if you have an intellectual disability, there's specialist support skills available. But for others, for people who have dyslexia or learning difficulties, you've done it yourselves. You've not had that the toolkit there to support you. One of the things I'm sharing is that I do a fair bit of work in Africa, and especially with COVID-19. So I've been talking to Kenya and also Nigeria and Nepal, all over the place, you know, Zimbabwe, and sharing the resources that are available here with them. So the COVID-19 and disability stuff. So the stuff put out by Scope, anything I find that's easy English, and I know that's not what people with dyslexia have, or need. But it's about, you know, how do we support our colleagues overseas? because I can tell you the issues that we face here are exactly the same in every country I go to. So last year I was in Africa and I was in Jakarta, and the issues that were raised were the same. You know, how do we change government? How do we change society's views towards us? How do we make sure we're not put on the outskirts of the village because my legs don't work? Or how do I explain to people that I learn differently? I can learn, but I learn differently. Or I see the world differently and I see what's written on the page differently. So it's all of that sort of stuff. Let's share. I mean, we're a huge group of people. You know, 20% of the population. So with Women with Disabilities Australia, that's 2.4 million women and girls over the age of 16 who are our client base. People with Disabilities Australia, well, you're looking at nearly 9 million people. But we're not a voting bloc because we're not united.
No, and that's the hard thing. But I mean, that was one of the great things about joining the Good Incubator was, and I don't know if there are other people with learning disabilities in the group. We don't talk about our disabilities as such, but to be able to be in that environment and to kind of advocate for the fact that it can be a disability for some people, and that so the opportunities to be mixing with other people that have disabilities, so we become that united voice, because it can be fragmented.
And I think, you know, so if we look at the NDIS, and I know that's not perfect, and that's certainly not perfect for people who have dyslexia or learning difficulties.
We're not covered under it yet.
Exactly. That's the thing. But I was one of the people who fought for this to get in, and I'm disappointed that it's not run quite as I wanted it to run. But one of the things that we learned from that is that if we've got a bigger voting voice, it works better. So people with disabilities, families and the service sector all worked separately and said, we are in disability, we're the experts. And we were told if the three of you got together and worked towards a common aim, which is better outcomes for people with disabilities, people might listen. And that's how we got it up. And I think that's how people with disabilities need to work collaboratively. So like in my diagnosis, which is the polio, and I'm happy with saying I had polio, but they want to stay segregated that it's about polio. In my work, if I was to talk about me, it would be 66-year-old women who had polio, who don't need much in the way of external supports other than calipers, home modifications and the physical stuff. And that's very limiting, whereas the issues are about how do we change society to make it accessible for everybody, regardless of what the diagnosis is. So for me, my passion is about how do I make sure that people who have dyslexia get a voice? How do I make sure that people who are deaf get a voice? How do I make sure that people who are blind get a voice? How do I make sure that people with intellectual disability, and that's a really hard group too, because somebody's always willing to talk for them and they don't get what they need. So I've got a group of friends who have intellectual disabilities, and they run a really powerful group, and they will ring me up and say, can you come and talk to us? Sure. What about? Well, can you talk to us about how to talk to doctors? And nobody's thought that they should have any knowledge about their own bodies. Right? And I know we're the experts, we'll tell you. And it's really interesting because they always say to me, we can't pay you. And for that group, I always say, that's fine, because I know they don't have any money. But they pay me with Tim Tams, which is a problem because my bottom just gets bigger. But, you know, sort of nobody's thought that people who have an intellectual disability might need to be empowered to say to the doctor, why am I in hospital? Do I have to have this operation? Can I say no to these tablets? What are these tablets for? And you sort of think, well, why not? Why is it that somebody else is always speaking on behalf of people? With the right supports, everybody has the opportunity to know what they need to do. Everybody has the right to say, this is my body. I'm the expert about my body. So with dyslexia and learning difficulties. I know many of the people that I know actually mask any form of disability that might be able to cause other people to discriminate against them. Should we have to mask? It's a question I'm putting to you, and it's perhaps for the dyslexia community to say it's time for us to own this as a position of pride.
And it's interesting you say that, because I never meant to come out as being dyslexic, but I always disclosed in a job because I didn't want to, because of how I'd been received previously before my diagnosis. I didn't want people thinking I was dumb or stupid or I wasn't doing my job properly. And even though I've still received that type of feedback after disclosing, the anxiety of not disclosing is much greater than if I tell someone I have it. But our campaign this year with the foundation is Faces of Dyslexia, and we're launching it next week. And it's to try and encourage people it's a self-portrait, so they can either do it of their face or their face can be hidden. And it's really to start a conversation around why people aren't disclosing at the moment and why is it so hard for them to disclose. And it's because we're not in a safe space to do that, and we don't get the support when we do. And so we're really hoping, normally we'd have an annual gala, and because of COVID we couldn't. So we thought, well, why don't we do this online art competition and try to get as many people as possible, whether they show their face or not, to help promote the concept so that people can start to come out and be proud. And I think because literacy is such a core component of our lives, and that it can feel so shameful if you can't do something that feels so basic for everybody else. And everything revolves around language and writing and reading. So it's trying to help remove that stigma that it's okay that your reading and writing isn't at the same level as someone else, because your skills are much greater in a different area than that other person. But it's, that stigma still that we're trying to reduce. And hopefully this campaign will at least start to get people thinking about dyslexia and learning disabilities, and that people are too scared to be their authentic self.
And that's an interesting thing. So with polio, it was the COVID-19 of the 50s, right? So they closed the schools. People would cross the road rather than talk to my family because, it was highly contagious, and that's how people got it. It was airborne, so the similarities with COVID are enormous. And one of the ways that it started to be more acceptable to have had polio, and this is only recently, is the number of people who are famous who had polio that nobody knew about because they always masked it because there was a shame about having a disability. So people like Alan Alda, who the actor, had polio. Kim Beazley, the politician, had polio. Joe Bjelke-Peterson had polio. Roosevelt had polio. The president of the US. It was always, everybody knew, but nobody spoke about it because, you can't have a president with a disability in a wheelchair, my goodness. But I'm just wondering if that's an opportunity for dyslexia as well. And I know that there are a number of actors who have come out now to say, well, I was dyslexic.
The UK have had a massive push around famous people with dyslexia and showing their strengths. And we don't have a lot of Australian famous people at the moment. There's a handful like Jessica Watson, who sailed around the world, and a couple of others, but there's not a huge amount of Australian famous people stepping up at the moment. And what we've also found is that a lot of people in our community have said, well, we don't have those strengths. And so they really struggle because they're still seeing their dyslexia as such a barrier for them in life, for their mental health and well-being, their ability to get a job or to have the education they want, that they're not seeing those strengths that Richard Branson, we see of him, or Jamie Oliver, or some of those big leaders coming out of the UK, made by dyslexia. That's who they are. And the work they do is great. But what we're finding in our community is that the challenges are so hard still that they can't see their strengths, or they're not able to use their strengths because we're not set up yet for them to do that.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, isn't it, starting from the ground floor, if you like, because there's not somebody already doing this. Where in the UK, their population is so much larger than ours. There's the opportunity for more people to be able, the diversity of people. And so you've got more people to choose from. So, well, I can see myself in that one. I mean, I'm never going to see myself in a champion runner. Although I have a niece who's a long distance runner, and she's at university in America doing a PhD on running.
Wow.
Whatever. I don't know. She's got, and won scholarships all the way through. She's been there for about 6 years now. But she often says to me that her running is about endurance, and perhaps so some of what I do is about endurance too. So she's smart, sort of. I always say to her, you get your running skills from me. But she says, no, I get my endurance from you. And so there's something about how our brains work that we don't pick up the strengths of others. We don't see ourselves because we're still struggling through that I can't do, rather than, yeah, but I'm not good at that, but look how good I am at that bit. Yeah. So I'm never going to be an actress or a runner, or never going to be anything else. But there are traits that I see in other people that I think, oh, yeah, okay, it's the endurance, or it's the ability to keep pushing through the barriers until you get to the other end of it. Or it might be that I've got the ability of an actress to smile in public, even when I don't feel like smiling. And I've got a way of masking who I am, so not everybody sees the real me. So I suffer greatly from depression. The only person who really sees that is my husband. I mean, I despise it because I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. But the only person who really sees it is Noel.
Yeah, and I talk about my struggle with depression too, because even as someone that's run a business, I'm doing my doctorate and I've written my book, the day-to-day struggles still sometimes are so overwhelming. They take over the things, and it's hard to see, actually I'm not a marathon runner, but I'm running a mental marathon and trying to get the awareness of dyslexia out there. And so I think it's how we work with people to try and flip that, to say, well, what are those? It could be like just what you described. I mean, that's an amazing strength. And for someone, your niece, to be able to take that from you and say, this is what I get from you. And I think it's been shown that strengths come in a variety of things. It's not just the normal ones that are put out there, becoming famous or becoming a billionaire, or they're actually not such strengths that everyone's going to have. It's what are those strengths that help us day to day, that get through.
It's really interesting. So I was having a discussion about sport the other day. I don't do any sport at all, except walking. I walk every day, but I don't see that as a sport. I see that as just me needing to exercise. And I was talking about sport, and we always get the Paralympians, look at this Paralympian, isn't that wonderful? And somebody said to me, most people aren't Olympians. Most people are just do sport. And what we need to do in the disability community is ensure that everybody has an opportunity to do ordinary sport, not the elite sport, but the ordinary. And I think that's what it is for us. We just want to be able to do the ordinary. If you do extraordinary, well, good on you, but let's just concentrate on what our own interests are and how we can do that to the best we can. None of my sisters are film stars or actresses. We're all extremely talented, but we're never going to get to that stage. All of us have done drama in some form or another. We're not going to be actresses. We're just going to be ordinary people who have fun.
And that's what we try to do with the podcast, is show that there's a lot of ordinary people just, succeeding in being ordinary. And we're not all going to be Richard Branson. There's only one of him in the world. And so we need to be our own one, whatever that is.
Absolutely.
And, so it is really around changing the thoughts of society, isn't it?
For me, it's not about me. It's about, how can I support you to be the best you are? And sometimes I worry that I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. But sometimes I think my strength is that I'm instinctive and that I'm able to hone in on what the issue is. So if you're dyslexic and you were to come to me my conversation wouldn't be about, oh, so you can't read the way I read. It would be about, well, how can I help you? What can I do to help you help yourself? What is it that you need to be able to succeed? Not about the diagnosis of that, because it's important in that you need to know yourself and you need to know why it is that you've struggled. That's the diagnosis part of it. But what is it that will help you participate in society and reach your goals? That's all it is for me. For me, it's more conversational. Let's unpick it. Let's look at what it is we're doing, what it is that you're struggling with, or what it is that society's struggling with. And how can you then talk to society to say, you know, the way you're doing things isn't right for me. So not about I can't follow what you do, but what you're doing is actually placing a barrier for me. So it's changing the conversation, if you like, without blaming, but just saying, did you know that I couldn't go to your meeting because it was held up a flight of stairs? Or did you know that setting a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning when it takes me 2 hours from getting out of bed to actually getting ready to leave the house is a barrier when you have a disability? Or did you know that when you sent me that contract, it was absolutely confusing? Why do you need to write it in legalese? Why can't you write it in plain English that anybody else, or to say, I need this in an audio version. Do you know that you have obligations under the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities to actually provide me with the information in the format that I need? It's quite interesting.
It is, and I've taken that as a quote to put out. Speaking of the Convention of Disabilities, I was having a conversation the other day around what is a reasonable adjustment and when does a reasonable adjustment become overcompensatory in the workplace. And I was saying that by law, an organisation should give you the tools you need to be able to get your job done. And sometimes you might get to a job and it's actually not the right fit for you. The organisation is still, as long as you've disclosed that you have a disability, so they can help you, they need to then help you under that under the Discrimination Act, or Disability Act. So have you had conversations where because I was in a situation at uni where they weren't going to fund me, I need editing support, and the Access and Equity Unit felt that the reasonable adjustment I was asking for was too much and that I needed to improve my writing skills. And I said, well, at a PhD level, this is the best of my ability, and then I need resources to help me finish off my work. So do you have conversations around when reasonable adjustments are too much or cheating or an unfair advantage to others?
It's really interesting, isn't it? What's a reasonable adjustment? And the reason it's written that way is reasonable adjustment is so that there is an out, you know, for the organisation. And it's something that I have had conversations about for many years, for many people. So a friend of mine doesn't speak. And her reasonable adjustment was that she's a lawyer, right? So she didn't have to do an oral presentation. She could do it using a communication tool. And everybody objected to her having to do that, you know, being allowed to do that using a tool, you know, that's cheating. And it's not. It's actually how we communicate. And I think this is a part of the communication part of it. So it is difficult conversation and you don't always win. You should, because this is actually a real thing. It's not something you've just gone, well, actually, I really just don't like writing, so therefore I'll just get somebody else to write it for me. So is it convincing people that you have the brain power, the knowledge and the expertise to do it, but you literally just can't write it? And that's what it is. It's not that you don't know. And how do you then convince them that the other person isn't writing your thesis?
Yeah.
It's only an editing tool.
And I'm lucky that that was the 35th edition that I'd sent the Access and Equity. They didn't realise that I'd written this 35 times. And I'm lucky I've got exceptionally supportive supervisors that have worked. They have seen me develop this paper. They know it's my work. But they actually had to meet with them to explain that, no, this was a reasonable adjustment for a student that has dyslexia at this level that needs papers published. And it was so stressful and such a big fight over it.
And it's why what we should be having is people with disability as the working in access and equity unit, and also having an advisory group that has people with a range of disability advising them, so that it's not somebody sitting in an office going, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, but actually having an examination, in my view, they should have been able to come to somebody like the Dyslexia Foundation to say, is this reasonable?
Yeah.
Not to talk to somebody who's in a wheelchair to say, is this reasonable? Because they haven't got a clue.
No.
I know there's a conflict here, of course, because it's you.
That's right. And I think that they didn't realise the advocacy role I play outside of university for other people. That my supervisors just said to me, we can't believe that this is happening when this is all the work you're doing is around this whole advocacy piece of why people need support and how they should be supported. But it was extremely stressful. And I just think I'm lucky that I've got the ability to do that advocacy work.
I suppose it's why I do what I do. I find it much harder to advocate for myself than I do to advocate for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, you can get this, you take you don't take the emotion out of it, but most of the emotion out. And you're able to say, well, this isn't right. And if you were a truly inclusive organisation, this is what you do. So I do a lot for other people that I wish I could do for myself.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Advocating for yourself. And I get frustrated with myself because I think here we are, it's constantly saying to people around self-advocacy and building your courage to do that. And then sometimes you're faced with it and you think, oh, but how am I going to do this for myself?
We don't want to have somebody say no to us, right, when we know that this is what we need. I must admit, so I worked for Victoria Police for about 10 years. And as I got less and less able to get around because my health failed, my disability increased exponentially. But they were fantastic. They let me work from home. This is back in the 90s, well before, we had all the equipment. So before they set me up with a computer and a phone line at home so I could continue working. So they were fabulous. And when I went back to work, they actually gave me a bed to sleep in for a couple of hours every afternoon.
Wow.
This is Victoria Police, sort of, and everybody's all, they wouldn't do that. They did that. They also let me set up an employment program in Victoria Police. So every person who was employed was a person with a disability if it wasn't a police role. I left and so did that. But, that was, if the police can do it, anybody can do it as far as I'm concerned. And that was because of my advocacy. It wasn't advocacy about me. It was because my boss said, I want Tricia to stay on. So a couple of really good superintendents that I worked with, one male, one female, who both said, no, we want Tricia. So I had support at a senior enough level. And I was well known in police because I talk to everybody. I don't care about rank or anything like that, I'm respectful, but everybody's the same to me. And so I was known already. But one of the things I was able to do was support staff members who had dyslexia in Victoria Police that nobody knew they had dyslexia, and that was including sworn police officers as well. Because nobody knows unless you've got a safe place to disclose it. And I was always that safe space. And it's also about gay police officers and whatever. I'm the safe space because I'm not judgmental. For me, it's about having the right supports in place regardless of what the barrier is. So I also supported women in Victoria Police because women were the enemy to Victoria Police. You can't have females doing this job.
Yep. So
it's about perceptions from the mainstream, I think, is what we need to focus on. It's not about us. It's about their inability to see us as fully functional members of society, because this is the way we've always done it and this is the way we're going to keep doing it. It's like COVID-19. Working from home, well, we can't do that, can we? No, we can't have Zoom meetings. We can't do that. Look, I can tell you that I've been doing Zoom for years now. I've had meetings from Heathrow Airport, from Jakarta, from Nairobi, well, not so good in Ireland. Their Wi-Fi isn't as good as it could be. But, you know, I've been to places where I've sat in Heathrow Airport having a Zoom meeting because I could. So how good is this? And so now we're getting people saying, oh, let's go back to normal now. Well, let's not.
No, we've got an opportunity to change.
And somebody said to me, well, we'll all be together for the next meeting. And I just said, my doctor said not till Christmas. I probably told a little fib. We've discussed it, but he didn't say I wasn't allowed to. He just said, Christmas sounds nice. And I've gone, yeah, okay, that's a rule. But why should I go to a meeting? You know, why should I have to attend in person when I can do it this way? It saves me 3 hours a day in travel time doing it this way.
Yeah, and the fatigue would be a lot less, not having to do that travel. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I can walk in my garden without having to see. I haven't left home except for medical appointments since March. That's fabulous. Mm-hmm. Noel goes and rides his bike and does the shopping, or takes the car and does the shopping, and it's fine, you know.
Yeah.
It's lovely. And we're still married. We haven't got divorced, living in the same house together.
Yeah, my partner and I, we've been very lucky. We said the same thing. We haven't left each other's sides in 3 months. And,
absolutely.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, what do you think we can do over the next 5 years to push policy change within Australia for everyone with disability?
I suppose unite. You know, see each other as allies, and the disability community needs allies the same as everyone else does. Call on the expertise of others. Join all the human rights groups like Women with Disabilities Australia, People with Disabilities Australia, the Disability Leadership Institute, which are empowering agencies to work for change. And that's where you get your tips from. What have you done? How have you done it? Lobby, 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 lobby. Join together as a voting bloc. I don't favour one side or another. People think they know me, but I have friends on all sides of politics. Be respectful of politicians, because they can be your greatest ally or your worst enemy. Doesn't mean you have to like everybody, but you just need to be able to have them on side. And just keep writing letters to politicians. That's the other thing. And write to corporations saying, you know, we can give you training on this issue, and don't give your stuff away for free. Own what you do.
They are great tips. Thank you so much, Tricia. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners today before we wrap it up? It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
Just be proud of who you are. You know, that's the main thing. A lot of you have done this hard for a long time, and you do have allies in the disability community. We're not judgmental. We're not here to say, well, your disability is not as good as my disability. It's not a competition. We all face different barriers to society.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and I hope we get to have another conversation, because I think there's so many other things we could unpack around reasonable adjustments and policy change and advocacy. So thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Shae. It's been great.
To find out more about Tricia and her work with the Women with Disabilities Australia or the Social Incubator Program, head to deardyslexic.com. If you haven't already done so yet, make sure you sign up to our mailing list so you can keep up to date with everything we do at the Foundation. Head to deardyslexic.com. And don't forget, if there is anything you have heard today that was distressing, please call Beyond Blue on 1300 22 46 36 or Lifeline on 13 11 14. Did you know we now have a new live Q&A series called Question Dis, DYS, created during COVID to help our community feel more connected? Each month, I interview a fellow dyslexic about all things dyslexia and life. The Question Dis series is running through Facebook Live. I really hope you can come along and join us for one of these sessions. If there is a topic you would like discussed on the show, please email us admin@deardyslexic.com. I hope you've enjoyed today. Bye for now.